There's a moment you know well, the plans get canceled. A whole evening suddenly opens up in front of you, empty, unscheduled, entirely yours. And instead of disappointment, instead of scrambling to fill it, something in you quietly exhales. A small, almost secret relief moves through your chest. You make tea, you lower the lights, you settle into the particular stillness of a space that belongs only to you tonight, and you think, this is exactly what I needed. This is the best thing that could have happened. You've probably learned not to say that out loud, because the world has a very specific story about women who prefer being alone. It says something must be wrong, that you're guarded or hurt or waiting to be fixed by the right person or the right circumstance. That solitude is a symptom rather than a choice. That preferring your own company is something to apologize for, to explain, to eventually grow out of. And for a long time, maybe you believed it too. Maybe you spent years wondering why other people's company exhausted you in ways that silence never did. But here's what the psychology actually says. Solitude is not the absence of connection. It is a different kind of it. When you are alone, genuinely, comfortably alone, you are in full contact with the one relationship that underlies every other one you will ever have. The relationship with your own interior world, your thoughts, your feelings, your instincts, your sense of what is true and what matters. Most people spend their entire lives slightly out of reach of this. They fill every quiet moment with noise, with screens, with other people's voices, because the silence of their own company makes them uneasy. You have learned to live inside that silence, and that is not a deficiency. That is a form of psychological development that most people never reach. Psychologists who study solitude, and there are more of them now than ever, have found something that challenges almost everything culture tells us about being alone. People who are comfortable with solitude, who actively seek it and use it well, consistently show higher levels of self-awareness, emotional regulation, and creative thinking. They are better at knowing what they actually feel, as opposed to what they're supposed to feel. They are less reactive under stress. They make decisions more aligned with their own values rather than the expectations of the people around them. Solitude, used consciously, builds a kind of internal architecture that social life alone cannot. Think about what happens to you when you have enough time alone. Not the restless kind, not isolation or avoidance, but the clean, chosen, comfortable solitude of an afternoon with no obligations, or a slow morning that belongs entirely to you. Something settles. Things become clearer. The noise that accumulates during days of interaction, other people's moods, unspoken tensions, the low hum of constantly managing how you're perceived, all of it gradually dissipates, and what remains is something quieter and truer. You remember what you actually think about things. You notice what your body is holding. You return to yourself in a way that feels less like escape and more like arriving. There's a concept in psychology called ego depletion, the way that sustained social interaction, even positive interaction, draws on a finite resource. Every conversation requires attention, calibration, emotional labor. You're reading cues, managing impressions, tracking the dynamics in the room, adjusting your words in real time to fit what the situation seems to need. For people with sensitive, finely tuned nervous systems, and women who prefer solitude very often have exactly this. All of that costs more than the average person realizes. It's not that you love people less. It's that you feel the interaction more completely, and you need genuine quiet to process what you've taken in. This is why your solitude is not really about being alone at all. It's about regulation, about returning your nervous system to a baseline where you can think clearly, feel accurately, and show up fully for yourself, and when you choose it, for the people you love. But let's be honest about something deeper. Preferring your own company often grows out of an interior life that is genuinely rich enough to be good company. The women who are most comfortable alone tend to be the ones who have built something inside themselves worth spending time with. A world of thoughts, of ideas, of ongoing inner dialogue that is interesting and alive. They read, or they think deeply, or they create things, or they observe the world with the kind of attention that makes ordinary things strange and beautiful. They are, in a very real sense, never entirely alone. because their interior world is inhabited and alive and constantly in conversation with them. This is what most people mistake for loneliness. It isn't. Loneliness is the ache of feeling unseen, of wanting connection and not having it. What you experience in your chosen solitude is closer to the opposite. It is the comfort of being fully seen by yourself, of existing in a space where you don't have to be anything other than exactly what you are at this particular moment. And still, there are evenings when the preference for solitude becomes something more complicated, when the quiet of the room feels less chosen and more like what's left after other options have felt too hard. When you realize you've been alone not because you wanted to be, but because letting someone fully in requires a kind of vulnerability that feels like standing in an open field with no shelter. The line between solitude as strength and solitude as protection is real, and it shifts. Some nights you are resting in yourself, other nights you are hiding there. This too is worth knowing, not to judge it, but to stay honest with yourself about which kind of alone you're in on any given night. Because the woman who prefers solitude is not someone who needs less connection than others. She often needs more, but of a very particular quality. She needs connection that doesn't require her to shrink, that can hold her full complexity without becoming overwhelmed by it, that moves slowly enough to feel safe. And until she finds that, or in between finding it, her own company remains the most reliable, the most honest, and often the most nourishing thing available to her. There is a word in psychology, autotelic, which describes experiences that are rewarding in themselves without requiring any external outcome or validation. The ability to find your own company autotelic, genuinely satisfying, self-sustaining, worth choosing, is considered one of the markers of psychological maturity. It means you are not dependent on external sources to feel complete, that your sense of okayness does not live entirely in other people's responses to you. This is rare, and it is something. The women who prefer being alone are not failing at human connection. They are practicing a different kind of it, one that begins from the inside out rather than the outside in. They are building, in the quiet of their chosen solitude, the kind of self that is genuinely available when connection does arrive, not performing, not adjusting, not managing. Simply present. Your preference for being alone is not a wall. It is a foundation. And what you build on top of it, the inner life, the self-knowledge, the quiet strength of someone who knows her own company is worth keeping. That is not something the loud world tends to celebrate, but it is something you know the value of, in the particular silence of an evening that's entirely yours, in the exhale that happens when the door closes and the room belongs to you again, in the simple, steady feeling of being exactly where you need to be. That knowing is enough. It has always been enough.